Hi, so my name's Rachel, and long story short, I'm going through cancer during a pandemic. I'm not an influencer, I'm not a YouTuber, I never saw myself doing something like this, but when I found out that I was diagnosed with cancer and just talking with my family members and friends about it, they just kept telling me, like you should document what you're going through because it can probably help somebody else. And before I found out I had cancer, I was just like anybody else, working my 2 jobs, working on my PhD, and then all of a sudden you're told, boom, you have cancer, and all that kind of gets put on hold for a little bit. And I mean put on hold, because when I am able to get back to work on all this and pursue what I was working towards and to reach the goals I was working on reaching, you better believe I will be right back at that point. But yeah, I'm just gonna go into like the backstory into how I found out that I had cancer. So October 5th, I went into the doctor for a physical. For that physical, I had also requested blood work because in the summer months, like August, July, I started to notice bruises on my body. First, they were really minimal, really small along my legs, and I'm also a huge klutz and always have a bruise or two. So I didn't really think anything of it at first, but then it'd be like a 3-day weekend here or there, and I would just be locked up in my room studying and catching up on homework for my classwork. And I'd wake up the next morning and just see massive bruises on my legs, on my stomach, just randomly without injury. So that's what caused me to be concerned. At first, I just thought, oh, it's probably low iron, or, maybe I'm anemic, whatever. I started to take iron supplements because I'm somebody who's always been relatively healthy. I've never had a medical issue to which I've needed to be in the hospital for myself. So when I started to notice all these spots on me, I was like, well, maybe, I probably should see the doctor. So when I was going for my physical, I also requested to get blood work for this specific reason and asked specifically that the doctor take a little extra time with me for that. So October 5th, I end up going into my doctor, and we're talking about the bruising. I show her the bruises, and the whole time she's like, yeah, we're definitely gonna get some blood work on you because that's not really common to get bruises without injury. And she told me that, sometimes certain viruses can cause that. Never did she bring up the C word. As a primary doctor, they're really not gonna talk about it that much, I feel. So I took it into my own hands to make sure I brought it up and made sure to request the blood work even before she said, yeah, you should probably do it, because I knew. When it's your body, when something's like up, when something's not right. Never did I think it'd be leukemia, but I just knew something was up. So we go through the whole physical process. She's like, everything looks healthy. And I'm like, yeah, I go to the gym, I like hiking, I'm always on the go. She's like, well, have you been feeling tired lately and this and that? I'm like, well, I don't feel any more tired than usual. I work 2 jobs and I'm a full-time student. There's, 5-6 nights out of the week, I'm going to bed at like 1 in the morning after working both of my jobs and having to stay up for class and then homework. That's just the norm for me right now. And she's like, okay, whatever. We send for blood work. And I get a call back from my doctor, like not even 20 minutes after my appointment. And she tells me, you need to go to the emergency room right away. So I go to the emergency room, and that's when she was explaining to me that my blood counts were really low. Like my platelet counts are really low, and that's why I was getting all the bleeding, because your platelets are what causes your blood to clot. And she was scared that I'd be at risk for internal bleeding somewhere, so I needed to go to the emergency room right away. I got to the emergency room maybe around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I spent the entire night there. I can't even tell you how many people came in to see me. And now, because it's COVID, I'm assuming that they kind of had an idea, because hospitals are so full, and many of them don't even have beds or room to put people, but they did get me into my own pod, which is good because with my disease, I am very susceptible to infection and my body can't fight that. So I'm grateful that I was in my own pod. But yeah, I had I had been a pincushion that entire night. I had people coming in and being like, oh, well, it could be mono, it could be this. I saw a few different doctors. And then it was maybe around midnight where the hematologist came in and was saying that he was going to be running a couple tests. Now, this man, maybe he's a great doctor and he knows what he's talking about and everything like that, but personally, I was not a fan. I feel like he did not treat me as a freaking human. And for anybody who's had any medical issues and has had to have, stays in the hospitals and stuff like that, it's awful when someone's like that. And I understand that they have a very difficult job and it desensitizes them to it because, it's emotional. You're dealing with people who are going through really tough stuff and you're seeing some really ugly things. So I get it. But at the same time, you have to remember that the person in front of you is human. And not only that, they're human and they're alone because of COVID. I sat there alone, and mind you, there's not good service in there, so I couldn't even I couldn't even get a phone call to my parents. Every single time I'm trying to call my friends or my parents to let them know what's going on, or my cousins, the phone's always cutting in and out. My text messages took forever to send, if they even sent. It was honestly, I was terrified, because like I said before, I never had anything medically wrong with me, and now all of a sudden I'm sitting in the emergency room during a freaking global pandemic, not knowing what the hell is wrong with me, and I'm alone. It was awful. So he comes in and he's asking me all kinds of questions about my family history, and I'm describing to him how much cancer runs in my family. My mother is one of 7, and 5 of the 7 siblings have either passed from cancer or have had it and thankfully survived. But everybody in my family who's had cancer, it hasn't been cancer like mine, considering I have a blood cancer. They all have tissue-related cancers, brain tumors, tumors within the liver, pancreatic, breast, cervical, and I'm the only one with a blood disease. So it's interesting to kind of think about. But I go through everything with him, explain everything. He's like, well, we're definitely going to be admitting you. We don't know yet what the cause is, but I just have to tell you what the possibilities are. And he was the first person to bring up the C word. And I instantly tunnel vision again. That's it. I hear that I could possibly have cancer and I already know, well, that's gotta be it. I knew, especially with having so much of it in my family. It's so messed up to think that I'm like, well, I'm not surprised that I'm next. And that's messed up, but that's what I thought. So he tells me that we're definitely gonna be getting me a bed and I'm gonna be admitted to the hospital. And then I have to call my parents and tell them that that's what's happening. I don't want to cry. And that was really hard for me. And so I didn't really say anything that's what he told me until really the next day. I just told my parents to protect them a little bit longer. I told them that, that they were going to be admitting me and keeping me until they get more test results back. So the next day rolls around in the afternoon and they finally get me a room. And then they finally tell me that, your parents can come, that you can have a visitor. And at first they were telling me just one. But they managed to let me have both of my parents come up. So I call my parents as soon as they tell me that they got me a room. And then they start to roll me up. And they roll me into oncology without even telling me for a fact what I had. So it pissed me off because I feel like they should have told me, because oncology, cancer. I knew exactly that I already had cancer. I didn't know what kind, but I knew it was something. So they finally get me in the room, and in comes the hematologist, the robot hematologist, and he is like, okay, can I speak with you? And I was like, I'd really appreciate it if you would wait until my parents get here, because I really don't want to be alone when you tell me whatever it is you have to tell me. Okay, I understand, but may I speak with you? Over and over again until I just kept saying, no, please can you wait? Please can you wait? I understand you're busy and I'm just a number on a list to you, but no one should be told that they have cancer alone. No one. I finally was like, okay, whatever. In comes marching like 3 nurses with tissue boxes, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Yep, I already know what I'm gonna hear. And he tells me that you have leukemia. And I didn't hear anything after you have leukemia. Nothing. I just cried and literally wailed, for a lack of a better word, like almost to the point to where I was probably like screaming. And not even 5 minutes after he tells me this, my parents walk in the door. So my parents walk in and they see me crying and they're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I have to tell them that I have cancer. And it really sucked. You feel guilty because my mom's had to deal with this, and all my family. They've had to deal with it so many times. Like, it hasn't even been like a full 2 years since we just buried our last family member who had it. And not to mention my cousin, who's also in his early 30s, who has a brain tumor. And we just found out his was back. And now it's me. And you just feel guilty because you don't want to be the next one to, like, put them through this pain. And I'm my mother's daughter, you know? And I just don't want anybody to worry about me and be sad. But what can you do, you know? Like, you feel guilty, but it's like, you know, nobody asked for this. And my brother is somebody who's very special to me. Maybe he doesn't know that, I don't know, but I worry about him all the time. Because I just want the best for him, and I want him to be successful and happy. And he's at work. And my parents, like, he knows something's wrong because I'm still at the hospital. My parents aren't talking to him because they're with me. And I wanted to be the one to tell him. Yeah, so waited to tell him till he got out of work. He finally got there and I had to tell him that I had cancer. And at the time, we just knew that I had leukemia. We didn't know yet what kind it was. So, like, right after I told my parents, the doctor didn't even give us 10 minutes to fucking sit there and talk to each other. He was like, okay, now turn over and we're gonna do a bone marrow biopsy right now, you know? Right there in the room, that's how they do it. And it was honestly the most painful thing that I've ever gone through because, like I said, I've never had any kind of injuries or anything like this beforehand. And they didn't use anything to numb me, really, or to help with the nerves, and nothing. So it was fucking awful. My parents are in the room listening to me scream as they're digging into my bones. So yeah, we waited a few days there until we got the results of my bone marrow biopsy. We found out that I had acute myeloid leukemia, which is actually pretty good considering the other types of leukemia, like chronic, that are much more difficult to treat. So as soon as we heard that I had leukemia, it wasn't even a doubt or an option. Like, we knew for a fact that we were going to be going to Boston to go to Dana-Farber. And in Boston, I can't even explain to you how amazing everyone there is. The doctors and the nurses, everyone is so incredible. My stay at Dana-Farber for my first round of chemo and treatment and everything was 38 days. 38 days in the hospital, and because of COVID, you can't leave your room at all. At all. So you literally walk around and pace in your room like a freaking rat in a cage, and it makes you go insane. Insane. So yeah, so while I was at Dana-Farber undergoing treatment, I recorded little snippets, kept like a little video diary of my stay there and what I was going through. It's not the best quality because I took them on my laptop camera, but I'm gonna put those in here to share my days there and how I felt and what it was like for me. And hopefully it helps one of you.